I loved him through the drinking, through the job losses, through the endless games he chose over real life. But when he bragged about sleeping with someone else just to make me bleed, something inside me died. I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a worn-out backpack, everything I could carry from a marriage that had already been dead long before I admitted it to myself. I caught the first bus to the city before sunrise, sitting by the window with my head pressed against the glass, pretending the tightening in my chest was excitement and not the raw fear of starting over with nothing. I was 23, with no savings, no backup plan, just a few crumpled bills to last me a month in a room that smelled like mold and regret. I married young because I thought love could fix everything, because I believed if I loved him hard enough, he'd find his way. Even when he drank too much, even when he lost job after job and spent weeks on the couch lost in video games, even when I caught him lying about where he'd been, I stayed. I stayed because I wanted to believe he just needed time, because I was so damn tired of running from broken things, and I wanted something to stay whole. It ended during another argument, one of those ugly ones where nothing new is said but everything inside you cracks open a little more. He looked me dead in the eyes, smiled like he was proud of it, and said he had slept with a girl from work, said it slow, like he wanted each word to carve itself into me, and then he added, almost gleeful, I wanted to hurt you. That was it. No shouting. No slamming doors. Just the click of something breaking inside me, quietly, finally. I packed without speaking, without crying. 2 bags and a backpack. That was all our life together was worth in the end. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. My parents wouldn't have cared. They had their own poisons to drink and their own ghosts to yell at. I didn't leave a note for him either. If he wanted closure, he could look for it at the bottom of a bottle, the way he looked for everything else. The city wasn't waiting for me with open arms. It offered me a bed in a shared room, greasy diner shifts, strangers who didn't care if you collapsed as long as you clocked in on time. It gave me long nights with ramen noodles and broken blinds, mornings where I questioned if I had made a mistake, if maybe broken love was better than no love at all. But every night I fell asleep alone, I reminded myself that nobody could hurt me worse than the people I used to call family. I didn't owe anyone anything now. Every bruise, every hunger pang, every exhausted breath, it was mine. And maybe surviving wasn't much, but it was something. And for now, that had to be enough. It was supposed to be just another walk, just a way to kill a few hours before my next shift without sitting alone in my room staring at the peeling paint on the walls. The park wasn't anything special, a few crooked benches, a cracked fountain that hadn't worked in years, patches of grass fighting to stay green under the weight of too many feet. I found a spot near the edge, tucked my knees up against my chest, and pulled out my old e-reader, the one thing I refused to leave behind. It was scratched, a little glitchy, but it still worked, still held a few stories that made the world feel less empty. I was lost in the pages when I heard the soft scrape of shoes on gravel. An old man stood there, a battered cap in one hand, smiling a little awkwardly. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. I hesitated for half a second, instinctively curling in on myself, but something in his eyes, tired, kind, worn down by the same kind of life that leaves marks you can't scrub off, made me nod. He sat with a soft grunt, stretching his legs out in front of him like he owned the whole damn world. For a while, we just sat like that, 2 strangers pretending the silence wasn't heavy. Then he noticed my e-reader. "Good book?" he asked. I showed him the cover, and to my surprise, he chuckled. "I read that one during my second deployment," he said. "Kept me sane in places where nothing else could." We started talking about the story, about the characters, about the way words sometimes save you when nothing else can. It was easy in a way nothing had been easy for a long time. No judgment. No pressure. Just 2 people clinging to the same piece of driftwood in a sea that didn't care if you sank. Eventually, he asked where I was from, what brought me here. I didn't tell him everything. Just enough. Enough for him to see the outline of the battles I fought every day. He nodded, slow and understanding, like he didn't need the ugly details to know the weight they carried. "Thanksgiving's coming up," he said after a while, looking out at the dying sun. "Family time and all that." He paused, scratched at the rim of his cap. "You got plans?" I shook my head. "Didn't think so," he said, smiling without pity. "You should come to ours. Big messy bunch. Too much food. Bad singing. You'll fit right in." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him I didn't belong anywhere anymore. But something in me, the part that was still raw and stupid and starving for warmth, said yes. Just like that. I said yes. Thanksgiving came faster than I thought it would, and the closer it got, the more my chest tightened. I almost bailed that morning. Almost sent some half-baked excuse about being sick or having to work. It was easier to be alone on purpose than to sit at a stranger's table and pretend like I belonged. But something heavier kept me moving. Maybe it was the way he looked at me on that bench, like it would matter to him if I showed up or not. Maybe it was just the simple, aching truth that I was tired of spending holidays invisible. I pulled on my cleanest pair of jeans, patched the hole in my jacket with duct tape, and made my way across the city to the address he texted me. It was a simple house, faded blue paint peeling a little around the windows, 2 cars squeezed into a driveway barely big enough for one. There were voices spilling out onto the lawn, kids shouting, someone laughing so hard they snorted. It hit me right then how long it had been since I heard a house sound alive like that. I stood there frozen until the door swung open and there he was, grinning like he'd been expecting me all along. "Come on in," he said, like it was the easiest thing in the world. Inside was chaos in the best way. People everywhere. Someone was burning something in the kitchen, a baby was wailing in the living room, and a woman in an apron immediately shoved a glass of cider into my hands before demanding to know my name and how I knew Grandpa Joe. That's what they called him. Grandpa Joe. I didn't even know his real name until that moment. But somehow, when I said I met him at the park, nobody blinked. Nobody asked for credentials. Nobody made me feel like an outsider. They just folded me into the noise and the warmth and the terrible off-key singing when someone pulled out a guitar. Dinner was loud and messy and not at all like the stiff holiday meals I grew up with where the TV blared over clinking forks and no one looked anyone else in the eye. Here, they argued over who made the better stuffing, they passed plates with hands still sticky from dessert, they teased each other like it was a second language. And when they went around the table saying what they were thankful for, no one skipped me. No one looked past me. I sat there with a lump in my throat the size of a fist, and when it was my turn, all I could choke out was, "I'm just thankful to be here." And somehow, that was enough. After Thanksgiving, I expected it to fade. I thought maybe it was just a one-time kindness, something people do when they feel generous and full of pie, and then forget about the next morning. I told myself not to get used to it, not to let it soften me. People leave. People move on. I knew that better than anyone. But they didn't forget. A week later, Grandpa Joe called just to check in. No reason, no favors needed, just to ask how I was doing. Then his daughter, the one with the loud laugh and the messy hair, texted to see if I wanted to come to her office and talk about an opening they had. "Nothing fancy," she wrote. "Just some part-time work. But it's a foot in the door." I almost said no. I almost let the fear win again. But something about the way they treated me, like I was already part of something, even if I didn't believe it yet, pushed me forward. The office was small, just a few desks and a lot of clutter, but it was warm. Alive. She walked me through the basics, data entry, filing, answering phones. Stuff I could learn. Stuff I could be good at if someone just gave me a chance. And they did. They didn't care about my messy past or the gaps in my resume. They cared that I showed up. That I tried. The first paycheck felt like holding sunlight in my hands. Not much, but enough. Enough to move out of the room with the moldy walls and into a place where I could see the sky without craning my neck. Enough to buy real groceries instead of just instant noodles. Enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I kept going. I worked late, learned fast, said yes to every opportunity no matter how small it seemed. I still had bad days. Days when the loneliness clawed at me, when I wondered if I'd ever really be whole. But the difference was, now I had somewhere to go. Somewhere to call. People who would notice if I disappeared. One afternoon, months later, I found myself back in that same park, sitting on that same crooked bench. Only this time, I wasn't hiding from the world. I was part of it. I was building something. And it all started because a tired old man with kind eyes asked if he could sit next to me. I left before sunrise. No screaming match, no slamming doors, just the low, dull ache of knowing I couldn't stay another day without losing whatever pieces of myself I still had left. I shoved 2 changes of clothes, my sketchbook, and a couple of wrinkled $20 bills into an old backpack. Slipped out the back door. Didn't even glance at the kitchen window, though I could feel Mom's plants watching me like sentries. The bus station was 2 miles away. I walked. No cab, no call to Jake. My phone was switched off, battery dead on purpose. I needed the silence more than I needed directions. Each step away from that house felt like shedding a second skin I'd been forced to wear since the day I was born. Good girl. Perfect daughter. Top grades. Curfew at 9. Smile for the neighbors. Be grateful. Be obedient. Be invisible. Jake was waiting when I finally arrived in the city, leaning against his beat-up sedan with a cigarette between his teeth and a half-hearted wave. He looked rougher than I remembered, wiry, tired, wearing the same hoodie he probably had since high school. But he smiled, and that was enough. For a while. The first month wasn't bad. I crashed on his couch. Waitressed at a grimy diner downtown, the kind where the air always smelled like burnt toast and broken dreams. Saved tips in a cracked coffee mug under the couch. Laughed at Jake's dumb jokes even when they stung a little. I kept telling myself this was just the first ugly step towards freedom. Every shift, every aching back, every ignored insult, it was all earning me something better down the line. But people don't always stay who you think they are. Jake drank more than he worked. Brought home girls who barely looked old enough to drive. Made digs about how I owed him whenever the mood struck. Sometimes he'd toss my stuff onto the floor just to remind me whose couch it was. And the worst part was how easily I swallowed it. How easily I told myself it was still better than what I left. By month 3, I knew I had to go. Found a room through a flyer taped to a grocery store bulletin board. Cash only. No pets. No questions. Perfect. I moved out one rainy Tuesday afternoon when Jake was passed out drunk, left a 20 on the counter for rent he wouldn't even remember I owed. The new place was barely more than a closet. Mold in the corners, windows that didn't quite shut. My bed was a mattress on the floor. The kitchen smelled like damp cardboard. But it was mine. No one barged in at midnight. No one told me I was lucky to have a roof over my head. No one demanded a smile like payment. I picked up a second job, cleaning overnight shifts at the airport. Bleach-stained sneakers. Cracked hands. Empty terminals that echoed every step like a gunshot. Most nights I moved like a ghost, wiping down chairs that would be dirty again before the sun rose, collecting half-eaten sandwiches and lost pacifiers. Sometimes I'd stand at the big glass windows and watch the planes take off, each one slicing through the night sky like they knew exactly where they were going. I didn't envy the people boarding them, not exactly. It was something softer, lonelier. I envisaged the idea of direction. Of motion. Of waking up somewhere new and never having to explain why you left. I didn't have that. Not yet. I had a mop, a paycheck that barely covered rent, and a stubborn refusal to crawl home and admit defeat. And for now, that would have to be enough. It happened on a Wednesday night, the kind where the air feels thick enough to choke you even inside the airport. I was wiping down the metal benches near gate C12, mine somewhere else entirely, when I heard the crash. A woman, mid-30s maybe, struggling with a suitcase twice her size, the cheap plastic handle finally snapping clean off and sending the whole thing sprawling across the floor. She froze, half laughing, half panicking, looking around like maybe someone else would magically swoop in and fix it. No one did. People just walked around her, dragging their own lives behind them without so much as a glance. I wiped my hands on my shirt and walked over. "You need a hand?" I asked, already bending down to help her gather up the runaway shoes and clothes. She laughed, embarrassed, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I think I need a miracle," she said. Her voice was warm but tired, the kind of tired you can't fake. I smiled a little and nodded toward the maintenance closet down the hall. "Give me a second," I said. 5 minutes later, I came back with duct tape and a handful of industrial zip ties. Between the two of us, we rigged the suitcase back into something resembling portable. She laughed again, real this time, that deep from the belly kind that made the fluorescent lights feel a little less harsh. "You must be used to saving disasters," she said, brushing dust off her jeans. I shrugged. Occupational hazard. She watched me for a second longer than most strangers usually do. Not suspicious, not judgmental. Just thoughtful. Then she stuck out her hand. "Anna," she said. "HR manager for Lockwood Industries. And you?" I hesitated a beat before answering. No titles to offer, no proud job to claim. "Just Ellie," I said. She smiled, a real smile, like that was more than enough. "Listen, Ellie," she said, glancing at the battered suitcase like it might betray her again, "we're hiring entry-level clerical assistants. Nothing glamorous. But better hours. Decent pay. Real benefits." I must have looked skeptical, because she chuckled and pulled a business card from her wallet, sliding it into my hand before I could think to refuse. "Think about it," she said. "You're doing work 10 times harder for half the thanks. You deserve better." And just like that, she was gone, rolling her Frankenstein suitcase towards security, vanishing into the hum of boarding calls and tired footsteps. I stood there for a long time after she left, holding the business card like it was something precious, something breakable. I could feel the pull already, that old familiar fear, whispering that people like me didn't get chances like this. That it was safer to stay invisible. Safer to survive in the cracks of someone else's world. I stuffed the card deep into my pocket and went back to mopping the endless rows of metal chairs. The night swallowed me up again, same as always. But deep down, something small, something stubborn, refused to die. Maybe it wasn't hope exactly. Maybe it was just the first real crack in the walls I'd spent my whole life building. Either way, something shifted. I didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The business card stayed buried at the bottom of my backpack for almost a week. Every night after work, when my body screamed from scrubbing endless rows of tile floors, I'd think about it. About the way Anna looked at me like I was worth something more than disposable labor. About the way her voice didn't carry even a hint of pity. But every morning, I'd shove the thought down deep again. Tell myself it wasn't for people like me. Tell myself it was safer not to hope. I knew disappointment. I could handle disappointment. It was hope that scared the hell out of me. Hope made you think you deserved better. Hope made you ask for things the world wasn't interested in giving. Then one night, after a shift that ended with some business traveler screaming at me because the bathroom was out of paper towels like I personally orchestrated the apocalypse, I found myself sitting on the curb behind the airport, cradling a vending machine coffee in my hands, staring up at the black sky. Planes roared overhead, carrying people to better places. I was so tired my bones hurt. And I thought, is this it? Is this really it? I pulled the card out of my backpack with shaking fingers. Anna's name. A company number. A chance. I didn't let myself think too much. Didn't give the fear enough oxygen to burn me back down. I walked to the payphone near the entrance. My cell was long dead, and dialed. My voice cracked when I said her name, but somehow she remembered me immediately. "I was hoping you'd call," she said. "Can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" I said yes before my brain could catch up. The next morning, I borrowed the least wrinkled clothes I had, tied my hair back, and made my way across town on 2 buses and a prayer. The office wasn't anything special. Beige walls, squeaky floors, buzzing fluorescent lights. But it was clean. Warm. Alive. I sat in a stiff chair while Anna and another woman, HR director, I think, asked me questions about organization, time management, reliability. I answered honestly. I told them I'd never worked in an office. Told them I didn't know all the fancy programs. But I knew how to show up on time. I knew how to work until my fingers bled if that's what it took. I knew how to be invisible when needed and impossible to ignore when it mattered. When the interview ended, Anna walked me to the elevator. "We'll be in touch," she said, smiling. And for the first time in a long, long time, I let myself believe she meant it. They called 3 days later while I was scrubbing sticky soda off the floor of the terminal. I almost didn't hear my name over the crackle of the old airport speakers. Anna's voice on the other end of the line was calm, steady. "We'd like to offer you the position," she said. "It's entry-level, but it's a start." I leaned against the mop handle like it was the only thing keeping me standing. "Yes," I said. I don't even remember if I asked about the pay. I just said yes. I gave my 2 weeks' notice at the cleaning company that same night. The manager barely blinked. People came and went all the time. Nobody missed the ghosts. The first day at the new job felt like stepping onto another planet. I sat at a cheap gray desk in a room full of humming computers and clicking keyboards, terrified that any second someone would realize I didn't belong there and throw me back out onto the street. I made mistakes. Got people's coffee orders wrong. Filed the wrong documents. Spent hours pretending I knew what the hell an internal routing request was. But every day, I showed up. Early. Ready. And every day, it got a little easier to breathe. I stopped jumping when someone said my name. Stopped waiting for the ground to open up under me. I saved every paycheck like it was sacred. First for food. Then for a real phone plan. Then, after a few months, I moved out of that moldy room into a tiny studio apartment with a door that locked and windows that actually closed. It wasn't much, but when I turned the key in that lock the first night, I felt something settle inside me. Like maybe I wasn't just surviving anymore. Maybe I was starting to live. Sometimes, on my way home from work, I would pass the airport. The place where I spent so many nights wiping up other people's messes, invisible and exhausted. I would watch the planes lift into the air and feel that old ache, that pull towards something bigger. But it wasn't the same anymore. I didn't envy them now. I didn't wish I was someone else in another life. I was building my own runway. Brick by broken brick. Quiet and stubborn and mine. And maybe it wasn't glamorous. Maybe nobody noticed. But I did. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Subscribe, hit the like button, and explore more fascinating stories.